What's up, everybody? It's your favorite list maker's favorite nerd, and today we are going to do our best, worst Transformers of the year. So you know where we start? We start with the top 5 most disappointing. Now, just a quick reminder to everybody, this doesn't mean that they're bad figures. It means that they were disappointing releases. For instance, if a company releases 10 out of 10 figures for 20 years and then releases one 9 out of 10 figure, that might be the most disappointing figure of the year. Does that make sense? Now you're nodding yes, but one of you will be in the comments obviously not understanding. Oh, let's give it a shot. Coming in at number 5 most disappointing figures of the year for me in regards to Transformers specifically is HasLab Deathsaurus. Now it's not that I think this is a bad figure. In fact, I think it's a good figure. But coming in at the same price point as Starsaber and only being one figure, and coming off the heels of releases such as Unicron, the Barge, Galactus, the Sentinel, and even being released alongside the His Tank, it lacked that speciality and that extra oomph that a HasLab crowdfunded venture should have. Really solid figure, wouldn't have been anywhere near this list had it appeared on your Target shelves. Because it didn't, it was a bit disappointing. Coming in at number 4, Magic Square Bruticus. I know people love this figure. I totally get why people love this figure. I totally understand why people love this figure. I can't express that enough. However, I'm not the biggest Magic Square fan. I like a lot of their sculpts. I think they capture a lot of character, and I think that their articulation engineering is top shelf. But their materials just drive me nuts. And they do on this set as well, but I really enjoyed this set. Every single release I felt like it was almost getting better and better, with the exception of their Onslaught, which I feel like was a clear standout. Just a really, really well done set. But the process of getting it to the Bruticus was just insane for me. The problems that Swindle creates with the connection, having to shave down bits of blast off in order to make that connection. I'm sure there'll be people that don't know what I'm talking about, but look around, it's a very common thing. Most people know exactly what I'm talking about. And because I had enjoyed so much of the previous individual releases, I was really disappointed when putting it all together. Number 3, Robosen's Bumblebee. Robosen's Optimus Prime was one of the most kind of like touching figures I had ever had the pleasure of messing with. It scratched some nostalgic itch in me of my childhood that had been lying dormant for decades. But the Bumblebee just didn't deliver in the same way, and I think it's mainly because it didn't have the transformation gimmick. I think it's going to be hard for Robosen to toe the line with figures that don't transform with that price point, alongside the precedent that they've already set with what they're capable of doing. But when they didn't do that, found it disappointing. Number 2, Fans Toys Blaster. Once again, solid figure, good figure. I love the transformation in the sense of what it does. Like, I think it's really clever. I'm into it. I love the tapes. Huge improvement from their Soundwave tapes. However, this release just came across completely soulless to me. I had it, put it on my shelf, enjoyed it for a bit, but just kept coming back to it like, why does this make me feel so empty? And eventually I realized it's because it is empty. It's the first Fans Toys offering that I've ever sold. It just didn't do anything for my collection. And Fans Toys usually does a ton for my collection, whether I like the figure or not. It usually has a presence that stands out, and this doesn't, to me. And that's why I found it disappointing and got it out of here. Numero uno, the Takara train bots. What a nightmare. Awesome trains, and that is it. And while most of us know the play here, right, in regards to the homage they're paying to the train system in Japan, having a new subline within the Masterpiece line to achieve it, etc., in spite of all of that, it is degrading what the term masterpiece means. It is altering the deal. And it has helped, it's not the only factor, but it has helped turn masterpiece from an adjective to a noun. And that's why they are my most disappointing releases of the year. And there they are together. And I think it's a fair list. The only one that I purchased myself was the Blaster, and I ended up selling that, so I don't have any of them currently in my possession. Well, I guess I have the trains in my possession technically, but they don't belong to me. And once again, it's not that the trains are bad, it's just that masterpiece is supposed to mean something. And when it doesn't, it's disappointing. Let's move on. So now we get to most surprisingly good. Once again, same sort of deal. This doesn't mean that the figure is great. If you release figures for 10 years that are a 1 out of 10, and then all of a sudden you release a figure that's a 3 out of 10, it might be the most surprisingly good figure of the year, even though it's a trash figure. Does that make sense? Now you're nodding. Okay, forget it. Anyway, number 5, most surprisingly good Transformer of the year. And I'm giving it to Iron Factory Ironhide. I'm not 100% in on the samurai aesthetic from Iron Factory. In addition to that, I feel like they've been all over the place Their Grimlock was really good. Their Prowl was not. Their Drift was arguably worse. But what I can't deny is this Ironhide is a lot of fun. And I thought it wasn't going to do it for me because of the alt mode kind of like being a tricky one to really nail home regarding the samurai motif. But it did it for me. And it grew on me like a mole. But I really enjoyed the figure and a lot came across in it for me, surprisingly. Number 4, Mod Fans Roller, we'll just call him, right? This company came out of nowhere, took a huge play out of the Fans Toys playbook with materials, paint choices, and to be fair, some limited articulation, with a straightforward transformation that fits right in. I don't expect that level of a fun quality figure from a new company with a first release, and they did it. And as a result, they made the list. Number 4. Number 3, Kang Toys Predaking. I followed this very closely. I thought this was headed for pure disaster. The aesthetic was too crazy, the monkey pants was too off-putting, then they threw in some wolf feet, and it started to feel like wolf tickets, if you know what I mean. But somehow, some way, they made it work. Not my favorite looking thing of all time. And I think they could have made a few concessions to really bring it home for some people. But I can't deny that it was a really well done, solid, sturdy, impressive, intimidating piece that looked very cohesive when I thought there was a good possibility it was going to be a mess. And because I thought there was a good possibility it would be a mess, it was surprisingly good. And that's why it's on the list. Number 2, Hasbro's Minosaur. Why? Because I was alive during the Combiner War era. More specifically, I was alive during the Minosaur release of the Combiner War era. I've seen how bad it can get. And this was anything but. Pretty solid, straightforward, sturdy, stable, kind of close enough representation at a retail release. What more could you ask for? Surprisingly good. Wouldn't have guessed that I would have liked it that much in a million years. Neither from the company, the line, the aesthetic, the price, all of it. Surprisingly good. But there can only be one clear winner, one numero uno. And that, for me, this year is Star Toys Blitzwing. I had every prediction that this was going to feel like a KO product. We've seen a lot of these pop-up companies recently. A lot of them feel like KO products. They get by with cheap prices and flashy paint, and everybody sort of just sits back and accepts it. And I thought this was going to find itself in the same predicament, only with less flashy paint. And you know what? It's not. It doesn't have the paint, that much is true, but it was pretty sturdy, steady, solid, stable, straightforward triple changer, which some of the big companies can't even pull off. And for that, it makes my most surprisingly good figure of the year, because I thought it was headed for a train wreck. And there they all are together. And I think that that's a pretty fair list of the surprisingly good figures. The only one that I got this year of this set is ironically the Minosaur from Hasbro. What a weird world we live in. But yep, surprisingly good. Now let's get into the fun stuff. Worst Transformers of the year. Coming in at number 5, Fans Toys Power Glide. Seems like it comes from an era before that I actually like from Fans Toys, but looks really weird in their modern takes. Looks like the kid with the knockoff jacket showing up to school on his first day. On top of that, you throw in a transformation that's absolutely horrifying, not fun, messy, convoluted, and confusing, and it comes in at number 5 worst Transformer of the year. Number 4, SND The One, which is their take on an Optimus Prime. One of the few third-party chugs I looked at this year that was, in my opinion, so bad that while it's only the third of 3 that I looked at, when I did the third-party awards on Patreon last week, I couldn't even include him in the category. We just picked between 2. I do think there's passion behind this. I do think this is a fan that came up with this. I think there's a person that really loves what they're doing behind this. But the budgetary constraints that I imagine they faced ended up making this a disaster. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Feels more like a model kit than it does like a figure. And it just can't compete in a space where Hasbro's doing pretty good things in a chug line. You want to compete, throw something that really can compete, or do it better, which isn't that difficult, and this did neither, making it number 4. Number 3, he's already been mentioned at one point through this video, but we're not going to let that stop us from mentioning him again. Iron Factory Prowl. I challenge people to try to transform this without at least one thing popping off of a ball peg. The amount of care that you'll have to do in order to achieve that goal will be ultimately empty for you in the end as you look at an alt mode that wasn't worth the effort. So you'll transform it back, and I challenge you once again to not pop something off a ball peg. And if you do, once again, you'll probably be disappointed at what you're left with. This is why Iron Factory is a confusing company for me these days. But that comes in at number 3. Number 2, Alien Attack King of Cavaliers. Their Optimus Prime that was such a train wreck of a piece that was sent to me free from Keith that I chose not to put it on my channel and kept it on Patreon. But I can tell you, after this review, a year after my time with their Megatron Megatron, I pray, beg, and plead that Alien Attack never make another figure as long as they live. I hope that they take up a hobby, something that is meaningful to them, knitting, oil painting, clay pottery, but get out of this game. Anyway, I digress. It's awful. But it's not as awful as something else. And this should come to no one as any surprise, but the Silverbolt from Dreamstar Toys. Just a complete disaster. A figure that pushed me to my limits, to a point where I had to take a baseball bat to it. A stunt I haven't had to pull in quite some time, but this one was worthy of my efforts. And never has a toy deserved it as much as this one did. It wears its plane on its back in small flimsy panels that don't quite do anything and line up to landing gear that has to go through the crack of a thigh in order to... It's ridiculous. Overthought, over-engineered, and not worth the price of admission. Worst figure of the year by far. And there they all are together. A really rough ragtag group of failures. To some, I wish better luck next time. To others, I hope there's never a next time. And of these 5, I only bought the Fans Toys Power Glide. So I did pretty good. I made out pretty okay there. Best Transformers of the year. Pam, 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 pam. So let's start with number 5. The Mastermind Creations Eject and Rewind. While they are starting to seem like a bit of an older design because the amount of time it's taking to get them out, they are still very gratifying and satisfying in a way that I hadn't expected them to quite feel. A lot of fun, tons of character and playability come through in them, interesting transformations, and great shelf presence. Straightforward figures coming in at number 5. Number 4, Kang Toys Thorilla, the Monkey Pants. I think I was able to connect with this figure in a way that I wasn't able to with the others because it was an original character, so I didn't hold it to any previous standard or iteration. I think on top of that, I love apes, so I might be biased. But lastly, the actual transformation was brilliant. Very, very interesting stuff. Kind of straightforward from robot to ape, but then really clever sort of manipulating of things to get to Monkey Pants mode. And then the Monkey Pants ended up being stable on top of that. Like, what more could you ask for? Coming in at number 3, Fans Toys Gears. Not their most impressive figure by any stretch of the imagination, but straightforward, decent articulation. The sculpt is what they want it to be. Nice paint. They don't always use nice paint these days. They kind of fluctuate back and forth, but they broke out the nice stuff for this one. An alt mode that looks like it's supposed to. Not my favorite iteration, but it's pulled off well. The materials feel good. The joints are great. It just checks all the boxes down the line as a straightforward quality standard release from Fans Toys, making it my number 3. Number 2, Flame Toys Jazz. I know people feel a way about it reusing parts from the Optimus Prime. I never picked up on that the entire time. It has such an identity all on its own with such an impressive presence and sculpt, along with gimmicks and accessories that integrate well. And the character just bleeds through it and comes to life with impressive materials, impressive articulation. This is what a premium piece looks and feels like, and I don't care what they had to use in order to make it outstanding. But once again, there can only be one figure of the year, one clear winner. And for me, this year, it's Robosen Grimlock. Once again, scratching that childhood nostalgic itch, bringing something to life in me that I haven't felt since I was 5 years old. Seeing something that I never thought I would see in real life, but always imagined in my head. A character truly coming to life that embodied the spirit of the character immensely. Beautiful paint, great materials, tons of character, impressive robotics. It's too expensive for what it ultimately is for my collection, but don't mistake one for the other in regard to my opinion on it. It is the best experience that I've had this year with a Transformer, so to speak. A truly quality piece that comes along only but once a year if you're lucky. And those are my top 5 figures of the year. All pretty quality, all pretty standard companies that make the cut, with the exception of Kang Toys. No real shakeups there. I know people will debate the Flame Toys and Robosen entries, but while they do, I'll be sitting here not caring, happy with my list. I think if you have any of these, you have a pretty quality piece in your collection. And that's my top-bottom list of Transformers for the year. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.